I'm Priyanka Raval of the Bristol Cable, here with Jeremy Corbyn. How did you find that?
Well, I was invited here under false pretenses to make jam, but it turned out into a discussion and an interview, which I wasn't very surprised by. But it was very interesting because we discussed origins of food, we discussed access to food, and then we went through making some jam and the use of sugar. We even discussed the production of sugar, sugar beet, sugar cane, and the volumes of sugar and the effect on our health and so on.
And the odd socialist question in there.
There were many socialist questions in there because the environment is fundamentally a socialist question. Because a free market economy cannot of itself preserve the environment. It has no interest in preserving the environment. It only has an interest in making profit out of the natural world. And ultimately, everything we are and everything we do comes from the ground. Look around you. Her shoes, his shoes, that drain cover, this surface area, this building, these bricks. Where do they all come from?
The ground.
The steel comes from iron ore in the ground. Tarmacadam comes from a mixture of oil and bitumen. Bricks come from clay in the ground. Everything has come from our exploitation of something else. That's not wrong, but at least understand it. And then understand the need for sustainability, and that means insects are irritating when they bite you, but very good when they pollinate your fruit.
Absolutely.
So live with them.
Do you prefer talking about maybe jam to politics these days?
Same thing.
Same thing. I
mean, you think about it, where does the fruit come from? Do we need to be bringing apples from New Zealand? Nothing against New Zealand, but is it really necessary to take apples 12,000 miles across the world? Or when they grow down the road in Somerset? So many of our children growing up anywhere often have no access to their own open space. The joy it brings to a child to grow their own tomatoes is amazing. It will change their life. So it's often very small things, and that's why community socialist projects like Bristol Transformed, you do things practically, bring people to the story through practical things.
I wanted to ask you about the news clubs that are part of the Peace and Justice Project. Through the Peace and Justice Project, we've set up news clubs around the country. News clubs bring together not just local journalists, but people who are interested in the news values, how it's distributed, how it's disseminated, and then challenging a lot of the news media norms that we suffer from, as a way of building up a stronger alternative. Because really, our media dominate how we think about things. So what dominates the news values? But Radio 4 Today programme, Guardian, Telegraph, Mail, Times. They dominate it with their sense of news values. Now their news values might not be the same as mine. So for example, that utterly appalling tragedy in Greece last week, when probably more than 500 people died when that ship collapsed. I listened to the radio report on it. At one level it was analysing what had happened, true. You know, why did the boat sink, and so on and so on and so on. But ask yourself the bigger question. Why did so many desperate people pay to go on a dangerous boat in order to try to get to what they believe to be a place of safety? That whole debate about the causes of it was completely ignored. It was like in Parliament, Suella Braverman, before her Priti Patel, and before her Theresa May, and so on, always go on about people traffickers. No, I hold no brief for people traffickers. I'm not a spokesperson for them or anything kind. We've created a market for them. Let's have a look at the causes of migration and the contribution people can make to their lives. And that's the thing about mainstream media, is that it does often lack that structural analysis and skews issues to be a certain way. But I think I was wondering with news clubs, because part of what we're doing at the Bristol Cable is to try and bring back local journalism, which has been really gutted over these past few years. So decimated. News clubs are a great way of doing
news clubs are a way of bringing up local journalism, local challenging, local reporting, either challenging the local media or supporting alternative media. I'm very lucky in that in my area we're covered by the Islington Tribune, which is part of Camden New Journal, cooperative group that runs an independent local paper. It can be quite edgy, it can be quite hard-hitting. That's good. That's how it should be. West Highland Free Press, set up with exactly the same intentions of talking about, in the West Highlands, rights of crofters, issues of pollution, issues of second homes, all that kind of thing. That's what edgy local media can do.
What does media for the many look like?
Access for all to get their voice heard, a right of reply to what's being said against you, and news values that report fairly everything that goes on. And so when something terrible, like, as I said, the tragedy in Greece comes on, don't just look at the immediate, who tied the rope to the boat, who didn't. The issue is, why were those people put in such a place of danger? Ask the fundamental question and be prepared to be unpopular when asking it.
And the way it's funded must come into that as well.
Well,
you have to overhaul.
Who owns the media?
About 4 people.
You look at Murdoch, look at Barclay Brothers, and so on. A very small number of people own a vast amount of the world's media, and those global corporations, when it suits them or a government or them working together, they can switch it all off. Look what happened to the Indian farmers on the point when they were at their most powerful. And they did win in the end, but about to win in Delhi, suddenly they lost all mobile phone and all internet connections.
Absolutely.
Knowing they could shut them up that way. So what did they do? Brought into use very old printing machines and duplicators and did newsletters and handed them out.
Okay.
Always keep the simple systems available.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking to the Bristol Cable.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You.
My pleasure.